Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz cat Tom Moon of the Group Ensemble Novo. They released the 2016 CD recently, Look to the Sky, and they are a vibrant part of the Philly jazz scene. They have a distinct Brazilian vibe, and they aim for that Bossa Nova lover out in the crowd. He discussed the band's beginnings, their activity these days, and the future, along with much more. So get to know Tom and the band and dig this interview, my friends.
Tom, thank you for taking a minute out today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I love the music, and I want to know what's going on with the band lately.
We play, for the last 2 years, we played monthly at this little place in Philly called Time Restaurant. And it's not like a jazz club. It sort of has a lot of the Philly jazz players on the weekend, but during the week it's kind of like a low-key hang. And we started to play there. That was where we began. And just kind of trying out this idea of, all right, can we play samba and bossa nova in a jazz way and not offend people who are, getting together for a drink or having dinner or something like that. That's how we started, and it kind of grew from there. I mean, we now have regulars that come back. Sometimes people dance there, and it's like a nice chill place. And out of that, we've done a bunch of other things. There's a jazz festival that we're part of this weekend in Philly, and we've recorded a couple of one album that's called Blue Night, and then this one that we just have out now called Look to the Sky, which is shorter, and we have another sort of mini album that's coming later in the summer.
How did you guys actually get together? How did this start? When did it start? What was the whole motivator?
It was really, the motivator was these beautiful melodies. We have, jazz players have kind of used the same jazz repertoire since bebop, which is nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful. It's a kind of a essential vocabulary for improvisation. But we were kind of like, you know what? We are not reaching. Sometimes playing jazz, you don't really reach people in the heart, And I spent a lot of time studying the music of Antonio Carlos Jobim, and I kept thinking, I want to really get to where I can play this music as an improviser and make something out of it. And of course, many people have done that before us, Stan Getz and João Gilberto with the great Getz Gilberto project, and, other things like that, Ileana Elias. Many people have approached this music. Cal Jader, the great vibraphonist. And when I expressed this to a vibraphone player in Philly by the name of Ben Galice, he said, boy, I love Brazilian music, and I've never found a way to really do it in an open, expansive way, the way he likes to play jazz. And I said, well, let's try. So that's how we got started. And we really were motivated more than anything else by sharing these melodies. And, you can go back to the early days of samba, way before Jobim in the 40s and 50s, and hear some of these parade, the carnival sambas are just beautiful melodies.
Well, you're out there in Philly, and Philly has a very rich tradition, the home of Coltrane. What is it like to be in the Philly scene? What's going on?
It's humbling to be part of, I'll tell you that. What's happened in the last decade or so is, in addition to there being a pool of talent from Philadelphia that has stayed here, we have some old heads, we call them, I'm old, so I can say it, who have been playing on the scene here for, 30 years. And they include people like the great drummer Mickey Roker, who was on a bunch of Blue Note records in the 60s, people who played with people like Mickey Roker and Shirley Scott, the great organ player, now may she rest in peace. The people who were around at the tail end of like the sort of zenith of Philly hard bop, there are some of those people still with us and still playing, and they play a lot. And so one thing that happens here is we have a lot of like intergenerational stuff. There has been long-running jam sessions where young players who are studying jazz at, say, Temple University or the University of the Arts here, both of which have amazing programs, and they're turning out students every year who are really equipped to play. the jam sessions, you would sometimes turn up kids who were 18 years old, and they'd be playing with a drummer who played with Groove Holmes back in the day, in the 70s. So that's an unusual feature of Philadelphia. And while we lack venues, we lack a real strong support network for jazz in terms of live jazz. The level of talent here is so deep, and to be part of it at all is kind of awe-inspiring, really.
So why do you think, after all of these years in the realm of jazz, with all of the idioms and all of the movements that have come through, your traditional Dixieland to bebop to your more modern sound, why do you think that Bossa Nova and that Brazilian vibe has stood the test of time and continues to thrive and be popular?
Boy, that's a great question. My first thought is because it's so melodic. One of the things that we talk about a lot in Ensemble Novo is just that we don't feel sometimes when we're out hearing even the most accomplished players in the world playing jazz that they are communicating to their audience. They're talking to jazz people, and they often are impressing all of us with both technical dexterity and everything else, but they're not really connecting. They're not sort of reaching across the aisle and saying, there is something inherently beautiful and uplifting about this music and the way we play it. And I feel like Samba and Bossa Nova, the songs written by Jobim, almost demand that. You can't play everything in the first 8 measures of a Jobim tune. You just can't. You have to honor the contour of those melodies, and those melodies, because they are simple and earnest and full of lyricism, they have a way of reaching out to people who might not appreciate or have heard so much from the Coltrane era of jazz. And again, I so respect that music. It's not like I'm saying this is better or worse or whatever. I just think, there comes a point where the technical mastery that Coltrane displayed and made into such a quest in its latter day stages where we are now, we don't have someone who's such a singular voice like that. We have a lot of really good technicians who don't express themselves in that way that Coltrane did with that, thing that made you were on board with Coltrane just because he was so, the quest itself was so immediate. And that's really hard to do, as anyone who's ever played this music will tell you. We represent the absolute other direction. We're saying we're not trying to dazzle anybody. We want to sort of sneak in. We want to our mission is to play this melody in a way that makes you go, all right, there's something in here that's just, it's like a little flower. It's just, waiting to be opened up a little bit. And if you do that right, then you can play some notes and show some technique and all that. But the melodies themselves, I think, are really important.
Even though you say you guys are sneaky and just kind of out there doing your thing, your music's out there, you're getting spun, people dig it. What's the future of the band?
Well, we want to keep learning. And we've been listening to there's a lot of music that's coming out of Brazil in the last 5-10 years that is very much rooted in the samba tradition, in bossa nova, and in sort of the funk traditions that took over everywhere in like the 70s, and here are expressed in jazz fusion, later Miles and Weather Report and stuff like that. They took that in their own direction, and there's been a lot of very interesting writing that happened, sort of after the period that we've so far been focusing on. So we are mostly a repertory group. We play, a lot of music written by Baden Powell, Edu Lobo. I mentioned Jobim. We're looking at ways to do more original music. I've been writing some things that we play. And so I feel like the next couple of things we do will be both more ambitious tunes from the Brazil songbook that people haven't heard so much, and then some original music that sort of shoots, that attempts the same thing with, and tries to align with what's going on now. There's a guy who plays mandolin named Hamilton de Holanda in Brazil, and he has like a couple of different groups, but his main group is like a quartet, and they are fabulous. They've recorded a bunch of records, and if he ever tours the U.S., he's worth seeing. Hamilton de Holanda.
Right on. What is one of the nicest things that a fan has ever said to you about your music? Something memorable about what you guys do?
Wow. There was one that I really wish we could have put on our press kit. This woman came up after we played one day, and she said, "You know what you guys are? You're like an audio caress." Okay. And I said, "Thank you very much. You made my life."
That's beautiful. So everyone has a perception of who you are. I mean, you all are individuals, but you're also an organism as a group together, and everyone has a perception. Your family has a perception, your friends, your business people, those that are in the crowd, those that buy your music. But you as an organism, as an entity in a band, who do you think you are? What's your perception of who you are and what you're doing?
We are a very small group, 5 people. We were 6, and we had a drummer and a percussionist, and now we just use percussion. And that change, I'll answer directly your question in a second, but just the change when you take away the drum kit and suddenly you have a percussion rig that our percussionist Jim Hamilton developed, where he uses the cajon from Puerto Rican derivation. It's like a box. He uses that as the root of his rig, and he's developed this sound that is just light and airy and open. And so everything that we do revolves around being able to hear each other like that. And to answer your question directly, I would say we are 5 people who, when we start to play, the top priority, the commitment that we have is to listen to each other. There is a lot of space in what we do. When we play live, some people, they don't even understand. We might have just started a set, and people won't know it for a while.
Very nice. I think that's a great way to wrap everything up. Tom, thank you for opening up about your band, your music, and what you're doing, and it's great stuff, man. I dig it very much.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me, and I hope we get there someday.
Yeah, I
love
do
your city.
Yes, we'd love to have you here on the Home of Bird, for sure.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Tom and the Ensemble Novo for their time and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.